Warning: the following content may contain elements that are not suitable for some audiences. Accordingly, viewer discretion is advised. On the morning of May 19, 1977, a 20-year-old woman named Colleen Stan left her home in Eugene, Oregon and stuck out her thumb. She was hitchhiking to a friend's birthday party in Northern California. It was a long trip, but hitchhiking was common in the 1970s, especially among young people, and Colleen was careful. She turned down 2 rides that morning because something didn't feel right. The third ride felt different. A young couple in a blue van. A husband, a wife, a baby in the back seat. Safe. Normal. Exactly what a careful young woman would look for. Colleen Stan climbed into that van. And for the next 7 years, she would not be free. What happened to Colleen Stan inside a small house in Red Bluff, California between 1977 and 1984 has been described by the FBI as unparalleled in their history. A case so psychologically complex, so deeply disturbing, that it challenged everything investigators and psychiatrists thought they understood about captivity, control, and the human mind. This is her story. To understand what happened to Colleen Stan, you first need to understand the 2 people who took her. Cameron Hooker was born in 1953 in Northern California. He was a lumber mill worker, quiet, unremarkable on the surface. He had met his wife Janice when she was just 16 years old. They married 2 years later in 1975. From the very beginning of their relationship, Cameron had practiced bondage on Janice. Restraints. Control. Submission. Janice had consented to this, at first. But as Cameron's demands grew darker and more extreme, Janice wanted out of that role. She wanted children. A normal family life. And so the couple made an agreement. Cameron could have a slave. A woman he could control, restrain, and abuse, outside of Janice. In return, Cameron would not have sexual intercourse with this other woman. That, apparently, was where Janice drew the line. This was not a spontaneous decision. This was a plan. Cameron and Janice drove the highways of Northern California deliberately, looking for a young woman traveling alone. Someone vulnerable. Someone who could be taken. On May 19, 1977, they found Colleen Stan. Colleen had been in the van for about 20 minutes when Cameron pulled off the highway. He told her he wanted to look at some nearby caves. Janice got out of the car with the baby. She walked down toward a lake. Then Cameron climbed into the back seat. He held a knife to Colleen's throat. He bound her hands. And then he placed a wooden box over her head. The head box was homemade, designed by Cameron himself. It was constructed to block out all light, all sound, and restrict airflow. It weighed approximately 20 pounds. It fit over the head and locked shut around the neck. Colleen later described the moment the box went on as one of complete and total darkness. She could barely breathe. She could hear nothing. She could see nothing. She rode the rest of the journey to Red Bluff in that box. When she arrived at the Hooker home on Oak Street, she was taken to the cellar. Cameron hung her from the ceiling by her wrists. And then he beat her. While Janice watched. Then. While Colleen hung there, Cameron and Janice had sex on a table beneath her. It was a deliberate act of dehumanization. A demonstration of power. A message delivered without words: you are not a person here. You are property. Over the weeks and months that followed, Colleen's world shrank to almost nothing. She was kept in a wooden box, coffin-like, barely large enough for a human body, for up to 23 hours a day. At first the box was kept in the basement. Later, when the Hookers moved to a mobile home, the box was kept under the couple's waterbed. Colleen lay beneath them as they slept. She managed bodily functions with a bedpan she positioned with her feet. She ate scraps passed down to her. In January 1978, Cameron presented Colleen with a document. A slave contract. It stated, in writing, that Colleen was surrendering her free will entirely to Cameron Hooker. That she agreed to be his property. That he owned her soul. Colleen signed it. Her name was changed. She was no longer Colleen. She was Kay. She was required to call Cameron Master and Janice Ma'am. She was not permitted to speak without permission. She was whipped, beaten, burned, and electrocuted. She was stretched on a rack. The abuse was systematic, regular, and calculated to break down any sense of identity or self she had left. And yet, even in all of this, something deeply human in Colleen Stan survived. She prayed. She kept a mental diary. She found small moments of calm to hold on to. She endured. Here is the question that haunts this case, the question that would later be asked loudly in court, in the media, and by the public. If Colleen Stan was allowed to jog outside. If she babysat the Hookers' children. If she visited her family in Oregon in 1981, why didn't she run? The answer is the company. Cameron Hooker had constructed an elaborate fiction. He told Colleen that he was a member of a powerful, shadowy organization, the company, that monitored slaves across the country. They had operatives everywhere. They were watching Colleen at all times. If she tried to escape, if she said a single word to anyone, the company would not only kill her. They would kill her family. Colleen believed him completely. This was not naivety. This was the result of years of calculated psychological conditioning, isolation, sensory deprivation, pain, fear, and the slow, methodical destruction of her sense of reality. Psychiatrists who later examined the case compared her psychological state to that of prisoners of war, or members of extremist cults. The techniques Cameron used, whether he understood them academically or not, were the same techniques used by state torturers and cult leaders to break the human will. In March 1981, 4 years into her captivity, Cameron allowed Colleen to visit her family in Oregon. Alone. Without supervision. She went. She spent time with her parents. She smiled in photographs. She said nothing. She came back. Because the company was watching. Because her family's lives depended on her compliance. Because by 1981, the psychological architecture Cameron had built inside her mind was so complete that escape felt not just impossible, but unthinkable. By the early 1980s, the dynamic inside the Hooker household had begun to shift. Cameron had started raping Colleen vaginally, in direct violation of his original agreement with Janice. He had developed an obsession with her that went beyond his original sadistic intentions. He spoke of marrying her. Of making her a permanent part of the family. Janice, who had spent years as a reluctant co-conspirator, a woman who was herself controlled and manipulated by Cameron, began to unravel. She confided in a pastor. The pastor told her to leave. In August 1984, 7 years and 3 months after Colleen had climbed into that blue van, Janice made a decision. She went to Colleen. And she told her the truth. There was no company. There never had been. It is almost impossible to imagine what that moment felt like for Colleen Stan. 7 years of absolute terror, rooted in a lie. 7 years of compliance, of suffering, of choosing not to run, because of something that didn't exist. Shortly after, Colleen walked to a bus station. She called her family to wire her money for a ticket. Then she called Cameron. She told him she was leaving. And that there was nothing he could do about it. He didn't stop her. Colleen Stan went home to her family. She did not go to the police. Janice had begged her not to. She wanted time to try to change Cameron. To fix what he was. Colleen, still deeply conditioned, still processing the incomprehensible reality of what had happened to her, agreed to wait. She tried to rebuild her life. She found a job. She attempted to reconnect with the person she had been before May 19, 1977. But the years passed. And Cameron did not change. Janice watched. She continued counseling with her minister. A friend warned her that Cameron might one day turn on their children. On November 7, 1984, Janice Hooker called the police. She told them everything. Cameron Hooker was arrested and charged with kidnapping, rape, sodomy, forced oral copulation, and multiple counts of sexual assault. What followed was one of the most disturbing trials in California history. Cameron's defense was audacious. He admitted to the kidnapping. He admitted to keeping Colleen in a box. But he insisted, with a straight face, that everything that came after was consensual. That Colleen had chosen to stay. That the slave contract she signed was legally meaningful. The prosecution dismantled this argument piece by piece. They presented the head box in court. The wooden coffin box. The slave contract. Photographs of Colleen in restraints. The rack Cameron had built. Both Colleen and Janice testified. Colleen's testimony lasted days. She sat in that courtroom and described, calmly and in detail, everything that had been done to her over 7 years. The jury heard all of it. In November 1985, Cameron Hooker was convicted on all counts. Kidnapping, rape, sodomy, and more. He was sentenced to 104 years in prison. Janice received full immunity in exchange for her testimony. During the trial, Janice also revealed something investigators had not known. She claimed Cameron had kidnapped and murdered another young woman, Marie Elizabeth Spanhake, before Colleen. A 19-year-old who had gone missing in 1976. Spanhake's body was never found. Cameron was never charged with her murder. She remains a missing person to this day. Colleen Stan survived. She rebuilt her life with extraordinary strength. She had a daughter. She became an advocate for survivors of abuse. She has spoken publicly about her experience, not as a victim, but as someone who endured the unendurable and came out the other side. Janice Hooker changed her surname back to her maiden name. She became a social worker in California. Colleen has said she does not keep in touch with her. And Cameron Hooker? He has been in prison since 1984. He is now in his early 70s. But here is the detail that makes this case relevant right now, in 2026. Cameron Hooker is currently facing a trial to determine whether he should be classified as a sexually violent predator. If the jury finds that he is, he will be transferred to a secure mental health facility indefinitely and will never be eligible for parole. Jury selection for that trial began in May 2026. After everything Colleen Stan endured, after everything Cameron Hooker did. The question of whether he will ever walk free is still being answered. Colleen Stan was 20 years old when she climbed into that blue van. She was careful. She was smart. She made exactly the kind of decision a cautious young woman should make, choosing a couple with a baby over a car full of strange men. None of it mattered. Because Cameron and Janice Hooker had planned for exactly that. They knew a young woman would trust a family. They used their own child as bait. What happened to Colleen over the 7 years that followed challenges our understanding of what human beings are capable of, both in terms of cruelty, and in terms of survival. She survived 23 hours a day in a box. She survived a lie so complete it reshaped her entire perception of reality. She survived 7 years of systematic abuse at the hands of 2 people who had reduced her to a name that wasn't hers. And then she walked to a bus station. Bought a ticket home. And rebuilt her life. If this story stayed with you, it should. Cases like Colleen's are a reminder that evil rarely looks the way we expect it to. It arrives in a blue van, with a baby in the back seat, on a warm California morning. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one. And leave a comment, of all the cases covered on this channel, which perpetrator do you think deserves the harshest judgment? I hope you enjoyed the video and I'll see you in the next one.